الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا وسيدنا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يا رب العالمين. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. First of all, I want to thank the organizers and the community here for having me back again. Alhamdulillah, as Saad was mentioning, this is my fourth year coming back here. It's always this conference always has a special place in my heart for a lot of reasons. But one of the main reasons is that I feel like this conference is doing something or tries to do something that a lot of other conferences don't. And that is take the conference beyond just a motivational weekend, which I think, by the way, is a cool thing. To have a motivational weekend, which I know a lot of people, they will criticize conferences and they'll say, what's the point of a conference? You come and you feel good for a couple of days and you go home and nothing's changed. Well, for me, even if you come and feel good for a few days, that's still better than not having a gathering like this. At the very least, our children get to come to a gathering like this and see the community and see the leaders and the imams and the scholars and the teachers and to see the organizers and see a little piece of the Muslim Ummah. Because our Ummah really is vast. It is way, way beyond the little bubble that we may live in or the little small community we may live in. I know a lot of times we go to the grocery store and we see a couple Muslims maybe, or we go to school or work or whatever, and it's really easy to get caught up and think, this is our Ummah. It's just me and like my 5 people, and that's Islam. When as a matter of fact, Islam is large. It's humongous. And if you crunch the numbers, we're talking about over 1 billion people across the span of this earth. And that within itself is a sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So a conference like this, or any conference really, is a small section, a portion of that sign. But for me, this conference has a special place in my heart because I know that the organizers are trying to take it beyond that. That yes, they want it to be a nice motivational weekend where you feel good about being Muslim and you get to see other Muslims, you get to see Muslim families and so on and so forth. But it's also a weekend that you can educate yourself and you can learn about Islam and you can become a better and empowered Muslim, because truly an empowered Muslim will only come about through sincerity and knowledge. And those are our keys to success. Sincerity with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and knowledge. Authentic, correct knowledge, acting upon that knowledge. And we hope that this conference serves that very purpose. And that's why, for me, when I come to this conference, one of the things I like about it is that I like seeing like this first row. Because I see the organizers sitting in the sessions. I go to a lot of conferences. I go to conferences all over America and even across the world. And it's rare that you see the organizers actually sitting in the sessions, taking notes, listening. And for me, it's and I know, inshallah, there's reward for the organizers, even if they're not in the sessions, because they put in the work and all that, and may Allah reward them for that. But we have to lead by example. And that's why it's great for me when I come into these sessions, sometimes I'll come like 5 minutes early or whatever, and I'll come sit and I'll see the organizers next to me. And that really, inshallah ta'ala, hopefully that lays the groundwork, or that lays the path for the rest of us. That lays the Shariah for the rest of us. Shariah, by the way, linguistically, one of the linguistic understandings of Shariah is that it is a path. It is a straight path which we want to follow. And so when we're talking about the topic of the Shariah, I know I came in, I caught just a few minutes of what Saad was saying, but the sentiment that he was expressing, it can be found all across America and all communities across America. And as he was mentioning, yes, it's normal to feel anxious in these days. It's normal to feel disenfranchised. It's normal to feel scared as well. It's normal to feel frightened and uncertain of our future. But the last thing we need to be doing right now is putting our heads in the ground, is hiding away, is saying, you know what, let me just try and practice my Islam in my little corner or whatever, and hopefully those people will leave me alone. Hopefully the racists and the bigots, the alt-right, or the alt-wrong, whatever you want to call them, hopefully they'll leave me alone. Like, hopefully I just need to make it past these 4 years and that's it. And, oftentimes people talk about, like, going to Canada and stuff like that. And I know we joke about that, but there's a part of us that's, like, really considering that, right? We're like, maybe that's not such a bad idea. And even myself, I was like, maybe I should go take a job somewhere else, give da'wah. I've done enough da'wah in America. Maybe I should go somewhere else and make da'wah now, right? But that's not the solution. We have to face these problems head on. And so the fact that we're talking about the Shariah, which, let's face it, it's a seemingly controversial topic, because when we think of, and especially like in the American society, we don't even hear the word Shariah. What we hear is Sharia law, right? That's what we hear. And you can do this test on your neighbor. You can go home tonight or tomorrow and do this test on your neighbor and say, hey, listen, I'm going to say 2 words to you, and you tell me what comes to your mind, right? And just look them right in the eye and say, Sharia law. And hopefully they'll be truthful and they'll tell you how they feel, and they'll be like, yeah, I don't know, like stoning and cutting off hands and things like that and all that, or women not getting their rights and all that. And unfortunately, that is the perception that a vast majority of people have of the Sharia, and it's sad when Muslims, because we hear it so much, right? And I know, like, alhamdulillah, our instinct is to reject that, and when we even like the not so knowledgeable person amongst us still has a basic understanding of somewhat understanding of what the Sharia is, but when you hear something enough, it'll eventually get to you, and you'll eventually start to buy into what people are saying. And it's sad when that happens, because that is a reality of the situation that we're living in. A few months ago, I was at a gathering. It was actually a social gathering where, it wasn't a conference or anything like that. I was just, me, whatever, in my everyday life. And my wife came up to me and she said, there's someone here who wants to talk to you. And I said, okay, sure. And she said, they have some questions about Islam, and, hopefully you can answer some of them. And so this person came up to me and they said, hey, I wanted to ask you a few questions. I heard you you talk about Islam. And I was like, yeah, I do talk about Islam. And this person said, I heard you've studied like traditional Islam, and I've heard you've studied Islamic law. And I said, yeah, I have. They said, okay, I have a few questions for you. And the questions that were being hurled my way were all of the like cliched, controversial or these issues that always get brought up, from jihad to extremism to women's rights, etc., the hijab, and so on and so on and so forth. And then as I was trying to deal with these questions and we were going back and forth or whatever, a part of me just stopped and I said, wait a minute, like what faith do you ascribe to? Or do you even have faith? And this person said, no, I'm atheist, but I used to be Muslim. I'm like, okay, now this kind of makes more sense to me, that this conversation that we're having, because it was like an onslaught. It was like an attack. And what I came to realize is that this person knew quite a lot about what is quote unquote wrong with Islam. And they knew the quote unquote right things to say, to push the right buttons, and so on and so forth. They even quoted they'll quote a specific ayah or a specific hadith, and they'll say, isn't this found in Sahih al-Bukhari? But I realized that if I would take that conversation just a step forward, like they would have no idea what I'm talking about. So if they mention Sahih al-Bukhari, I would say, we talk about what is Sahih al-Bukhari, and they're like, I don't know, it's like some tradition of something. Like they didn't know what Sahih al-Bukhari was, but they quoted that to me. And that got me thinking, and I said, it's sad, subhanAllah, that now we, even as Muslims, sometimes we get exposed more to the problems than the actual texts themselves. Then I don't want to say the solutions, but the base, the principles of our deen. And this is the generation, and for me, I often look at this generation, I say, I think this is going to be the defining generation. And that, we were talking about the silver lining, and Saad mentioned that perhaps there is goodness in what's happening now, and it's very clear to me that the goodness is we have no choice now. We either wake up and we educate ourselves about our deen, we begin to learn and understand what our deen is, or we're gonna fall to the sides. Right? There's no more. We can no longer live our life as that complacent, Muslim who just lives in their house and, they pray their prayers at home and they don't really go to the masjid, or they go to masjid on Jum'ah or for Eid, and that's it. And that's it. That's their only relationship with Islam. Or their relationship with Islam comes about when somebody gets married or someone dies. Right? We can no longer live that type of Islam because now our neighbor knows a lot about Islam. Sometimes there's non-Muslims, and I'm not talking about, an academic or somebody who, has a degree in Islam or religion. I'm talking about your average American out there, someone who just watches the news. They hear terms like Shariah or Sharia law. They hear things like jihad and this and that, and so these terms have become commonplace. And so if we are not educated in our deen, if we do not understand our deen, then we are going to, as I said, we're going to fall to the sides. And I know, subhanAllah, a lot of times it's disheartening when we hear about ex-Muslims. We hear about Muslims turning atheists. And I know that's almost a taboo. Like, we almost don't even want to talk about that. Right? And I often hear, speakers, and I myself, I've said this before, Islam is the fastest growing religion. Right? With all the hate that we get and with all the propaganda and all that kind of stuff and whatever, it's still the fastest growing religion. Yes. But still, along with that, we are still seeing people who are born and raised as Muslims leaving Islam. And a lot of that has to do with our lack of education. Our lack of empowering ourselves with what Islam really is. So, alhamdulillah, there's a weekend dedicated to understanding what the Sharia is. There's a weekend dedicated to breaking these misconceptions. Because even, as I said, it's not just non-Muslims, even Muslims, even for ourselves, when we hear the word Sharia, oftentimes the first place our mind goes is to the hudud, it's to the crimes and punishments. Which no doubt that's a part of our Sharia, that's a part of Islamic law, but Islamic law is far more vast than that. When we look at Islamic law, we're talking about a body of issues, always starting from even our personal hygiene, washing and wudu and ghusl, and all of these small, seemingly small details that have been defined for us. There's economic laws, our zakat al-fitr, our charity, all of that is part of the Sharia. There is our food and drink, right? And once again, I know this is one issue that will pop out, but the dhabiha issue, right? That's part of the Sharia. Which, alhamdulillah, if we're not, knowledgeable in anything else, at least we're knowledgeable in the dhabiha issue, right? Right? We know the latest about what's going on, what the opinions are, and so on and so forth. But that is part of our Sharia. Eating from that which is good. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Kulu min tayyibati ma razaqnakum." Eat from the pure, the good of what we have blessed you with. So as a Muslim, part of our Sharia is learning what is good, what is considered pure, and what do we put into our bodies. All of that is part of our Sharia. Our food and our drink, our dress code, or our guidelines when it comes to what we wear and how we wear it. When it comes to our modesty, our physical modesty, all of that is defined by our Sharia. And let's not forget the acts of worship. Right? When you study fiqh, when you study jurisprudence, it starts usually with the most important act of worship, the salah. But there's a precursor to that, and that's purity, because you need to purify yourself to perform salah. So it'll start with purity. And then we get into the acts of worship. And subhanAllah, there's a lot of students out there. I remember when studying in Medina, there's a lot of students out there who start studying Islamic law, but they only study the acts of worship. Why? Because it's a tedious process, and you study tahara, you study purity, you study salah, and you study fasting, and you study hajj and umrah, and this and that. And by the time you get to the other things like zakah and so on and so forth, people are like, "Oh, I'm tired, like I'm done with it." And then they lose their motivation, and then a year later they're like, "Okay, I need to study Islam again," so they'll start back with tahara all over again. Right? And I know there's a lot of us who studied like tahara and salah like 50 times. But everything else, we haven't really studied it. Well, that's a big part of the Sharia. When it comes to when it comes to marital law, when it comes to nikah and divorce and khula and these matters, all of this is defined by our Sharia. And yes, you know what? The the criminal laws, criminal jurisprudence, yes, that's part of the Shariah as well. But you know what? Let's be pragmatic for a moment. For us, right now, and by us I mean us sitting here in this room, that is what the Shariah really is. And I know, I'm not denying that crimes and punishment and hudud and all that are part of the Shariah, there's no doubt. But to be pragmatic, for us, in the context that we are living in, that is the Shariah for us. It is our acts of worship. It is our dealing with one another. It is it's marriage and divorce, and it's all of that. That is how that is what defines the Shariah for us. And so that is what the Shariah is. And then there's the spiritual aspect of our Shariah. I mentioned the acts of worship. But the acts of worship aren't simply rituals. They aren't things that we just do day in and day out. There's a spiritual component to that. And that spiritual component is part of the Shariah. I'll give you one example. The intention when it comes to our acts of worship. The intention for our salah. Without the correct intention, our salah is meaningless. A person can get up and make takbir. They can tie their hands, they can recite Surah Al-Fatiha, they can pray their prayer exactly the way they're supposed to pray, physically and verbally, right? They say the right things and they do right things. But if they're not intending to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if they're not intending to pray their prayer, then that prayer doesn't mean anything. Why? And that's not a dig on that's not to put people down for not having the right intention, but that is to encourage people to find that spirituality in your worship. Your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah Azza wa Jal. When Allah legislated those matters, when Allah legislated the salah, and Allah legislated fasting, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala legislated hajj, and so on and so forth, that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala giving us the bare minimum of our spirituality. Right? That's the bare minimum we need to be fulfilled human beings. You know, Allah has created us with needs, and one of the big need is our spiritual need. And I know oftentimes people say, like, why is it necessary that we pray 5 times a day? Why is it necessary? And obviously the correct answer is yes, Allah has commanded it, and that's right. But for a lot of people now, subhanAllah, that's not enough anymore. Right? And there is an answer to that. An answer to that is very clear. That is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala giving us our bare minimum of our spirituality. Meaning, let's look at the prayer, for example. Without the 5 daily fard prayers, without that, we're not going to feel spiritually fulfilled. We can add to it, right? We can do more. We can pray the sunnah prayers and the nafil prayers and so on and so forth. We can pray qiyamul layl and all that. And we can add to that and increase in our spirituality and get even closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and feel even more fulfilled. But the bare minimum are the 5 daily prayers. And any single individual who at any point in their life has prayed 5 times a day on time, and then they've kind of slacked on it, they know exactly what I'm talking about. We feel our spirituality suffer. We feel like something is missing, something is wrong. And that is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us. That is why Allah made it law. Right? That is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made that obligatory upon us. Because Allah created us, and Allah knows that without that, we're not going to survive. Something as simple as smiling. Right? The Prophet ﷺ, he said, لَا تَحْقِرَنَّ مِنَ الْمَعْرُوفِ شَيْئًا. He said, never belittle anything from goodness. وَلَوْ أَن تَلْقَى أَخَاكَ بِوَجْهٍ طَلِيقٍ. Even if it's you facing your brother with a cheerful face. In other words, smiling at them. And I know oftentimes we think of this as a hadith. Oh, that's nice, Prophet told us to do this, or encouraged us to smile. But if you bring that into the Shariah, if you bring it into Islamic law, we can give that a ruling. And as a matter of fact, everything in life has a ruling. We may be aware of that ruling or not. But the 5 rulings of Islam, right? We have fard or wajib. We have mustahab. We have that which is mubah, that which is allowed. We have makruh and haram. These are our 5 rulings in Islam. Anything in life can be placed into these rulings. Any single thing. Eating, drinking, walking, going to school, anything you can think of. Right? So if we take this matter, the Prophet told us to not belittle anything from goodness, even smiling in the face of your brother. This hadith now, scholars of jurisprudence, Islamic scholars of law will look at that and say, well, this hadith shows us, this is one of the evidences that shows us that it is mustahab. It is recommended. It is good to smile at other people. That is the Sharia. And that is the vastness of our Sharia. And we oftentimes don't think of that. We often don't realize that that is part of the Sharia, because almost, like I said, we're almost afraid of that word. We're almost afraid of using the word Sharia. But a Muslim, our whole life is the Sharia. Everything we do is the Sharia. What makes us better in our everyday lives is the Sharia. And that is why, subhanAllah, if you want to look at the essence of the Sharia, and this is what I often say to non-Muslims, or someone comes up to me and starts questioning me about certain rulings in the Sharia. I often say to them, if you want to know the essence of the Sharia, if you want to know what the Sharia is really about, right, we can debate these matters one at a time and so on and so forth, but if you want to know the essence of the Sharia, look at the maqasid. Look at the objectives or the goals of the Sharia. And 4 out of 5 of these, even an atheist will have to agree that these are important matters, right? The preservation of our faith, right? Yeah, the atheist may say, no, there's no need for that. There's no need for faith and spirituality and belief in God and so on and so forth. So we'll put that aside. The preservation of life, of nafs, right? The sanctity of life, the sanctity of human life and other life as well. Right? This is one of the higher goals, one of the higher objectives of the Sharia, to protect our lineage, to preserve our lineage and our offspring. Who can deny that? The importance of having offspring and carrying on the human race. There is the protection or the preservation of our intellect, right? The atheist will jump on board for that. Just say intellect and like, great. Science, I'm on board. Science is my religion. Right? I'm good with that. Right? Of course, that's one of the objectives of our Sharia. There's the preservation of property and wealth. That is the essence of our Sharia. Yeah, we can debate these individual matters one at a time and so on and so forth, but that is really the essence of our Sharia. And anybody who studies the maqasid, even at a basic level, will be in awe. They will feel nothing but love for the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is why I'm so glad. I was looking through the program for this conference, and alhamdulillah, it's being taught. In some, I believe Sheikh Joe is teaching it, right? Alhamdulillah, it's being taught. And I urge you to attend that session, because that will fill you with love for the deen and the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And like I said, it's really easy to get caught up in the individual laws and say, well, I don't really understand why Allah has made this haram, or Allah has made this halal, or Allah has legislated this and not legislated that, and so on and so forth. But when you take that, and you step back and you take that look at the Sharia, you really understand what the Sharia is about. And you know, one of the biggest, or one of the arguments that is brought against the Sharia, you know, going back to the story that I started with earlier, of that ex-Muslim atheist that came up to me. One of the things that was said to me, one of the things that I was questioned about was, they said, you know, do you believe that Islam needs to be reformed? And I said, no, I don't believe that Islam needs to be reformed. I believe that we need to understand Islam in the modern context, obviously, but I don't believe Islam needs to be changed. And then the follow-up question to that was, well, people use Islam for violence. They justify their violence by using the texts of Islam. So don't we need to change what is meant by those texts? And my answer was a very simple answer. And that is that any system of laws can be abused. Any system of laws, any code, anything that is codified can be abused. And once again, we went through that exercise, which all of us should know should be second nature by now. Right? The whole argument of, well, isn't the problem with the texts, right? Aren't the texts inherently violent? Right? Isn't Islam an inherently violent religion? And this is the same exercise. You're like, okay, well, if that's the case, Then how many Muslims are there in the world? Okay, there's 1 billion Muslims. Okay, how many of those people are violent? Okay, it's this number. If you look at the percentage, it's this small percentage. Doesn't make sense, right? That, you know what that means? The majority of Muslims out there are not scholars, right? Do we all agree on that? Yes? Yes? The majority of Muslims in the world are lay people, laymen. The majority of Muslims in the world may not be qualified to interpret the Quran, maybe. But if you just leave them on their own, 99.9 whatever percent are not going to use Islam for violence. The majority of Muslims are not going to, they're not going to look at this ayah and say, hey, it tells me I gotta go kill the Jews and Christians. Right? They're going to interpret Islam in the proper way, by the way, I'm not encouraging interpreting the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without qualification. That's not my point here. My point is that if you want to look at what Islam inherently is, then look at the majority of what the Muslims are doing with Islam. Right? It's a small minority, and even subhanAllah, oftentimes the Shariah, Islamic law is compared to like Western law or American law. And how many, for every case that you can cite of someone using the Shariah to do something bad or do something wrong, you can cite 10 cases, if not more, of how not even Western law, American law was used to harm and kill and oppress and suppress people. Starting with slavery. And that's a blemish on American history that we can't wash away. Right? Till today, we see the repercussions of it. Right? The Jim Crow laws. And then the whole issue of, free labor. Well, when slavery ended, they had to figure out how to get free labor. So they put it in the law. They found a way to lock up African Americans, right? And that means free labor. That's using laws to take advantage of people, to abuse people. And then, until recently, subhanAllah, the Patriot Act. What was that? And every single Muslim knows this. Every single Muslim who's been at the airport and they're being harassed at the airport and they're being questioned about their deen and which mosque do you pray at and what are your beliefs regarding this and what are your beliefs regarding that, and you feel like you're being harassed. Every Muslim knows, and then if you question it, they're like, yeah, this is legal. We're allowed to do this. And any single Muslim who's been at the border and who's kind of like spoken back and said, do you really have the right to ask me this stuff? They're like, yes, we do have the right to do that. You know that law is messed up. Right? Until today, subhanAllah, with the election of Donald Trump and how certain laws are being proposed, right? Till today, we're suffering from this issue. When we leave legislation up to the whims and desires of mankind, then it definitely will be abused. Yes, can the Sharia be abused? Yes, it can. But it's a very, very small percentage of the population, very, very small percentage of Muslims that will actually abuse the Sharia in that way. And once again, the proof is in the pudding. This is not something that we don't even need, all you have to do is look at the Muslim population and see how many people are actually using Islam to do what Islam is presented as doing, being a violent religion and so on and so forth. And so our responsibility, my brothers and sisters, is to be an educated Muslim. I touched upon just a few things right now, but I wanted to throw these nuggets out there. I wanted to put these points out there because inshallah ta'ala, looking at the program, I know a lot of these things will be discussed in further detail. And so it is important for us, alhamdulillah, that you're here. It is important for us to educate ourselves, to empower ourselves with this knowledge. And my advice is any session that you can attend it. Whatever you have to do to be at that session, attend it. Because it's not a hypothetical situation anymore where somebody's going to ask you about Islam. Islam is no longer left to the du'at, right? Like, oh, it's the scholars and the teachers. They have to speak about Islam. No, all of us have to speak about Islam. When you go home, when you go back to work, when you go back to school, and people question you about Islam, you're going to have to answer for Islam. And yes, I know the correct answer is Allahu A'lam. And hopefully you say Allahu A'lam when you don't know the answer. But at the same time, my brothers and sisters, we are representatives of Islam. And I know it's easy to get disheartened sometimes when you watch the news, especially watch like Fox News and stuff like that. And you're like, what are they doing to Islam? Right? I can't believe they're saying this about Islam. In my short time being on this earth, in my short time as being a consciously practicing Muslim, one of the things that I've learned is that human interaction, personal interaction, will always be more powerful than any propaganda. Our daily interaction with our neighbors and our friends and so on and so forth, when they know you as a Muslim and they know what you're about, that's going to be far, far, far stronger and more effective than anything like the media has to say. And I'll end with one story, inshallah ta'ala. My last year and a half in college, I was at the University of Maryland. I was studying design, and in my senior level classes, the class size was very small. It was about 15 people. It was specialized classes. And so we were pretty much like the 10, 15 of us, we were together for like a year and a half. So we got to know one another more than you would know like your average college classmate or whatever. And so one of the guys in my class, he was a self-professed redneck. He'd be like, I'm a redneck. You know, that's who I am. It's my identity or whatever. And he sat next to me through that year and a half. And I got a lot of time to talk to him. And I was pretty hardcore in college. I just first started practicing. I'd wear a thobe to class every day. You know, I'd be like pray right in the corner of the classroom. Like, I don't care. Allahu Akbar, right? And I was like, I don't care what you think, right? This is me, this is who I am. But subhanAllah, after spending that year and a half with this guy, one of the things that he said to me at the end of this, like we were graduating, he said to me, you know, I've been thinking about starting a business, like opening up a design studio. And he said, I think out of all the people in this room, like out of all the people that we've studied with, I'd want to do it with you. And he goes, not because you're the best designer here. He goes, and I was like, why? Like, why me? Like, we're so different, right? You're like a self-professed redneck, right? I was raised in the suburbs in Maryland, right? I'm Muslim, right? Like, super proud Muslim and all that. He goes, the reason why I would pick you over everyone else, he says, because I trust you. He goes, I see that you are strong in your convictions. That when you say something, you mean it. When you stand for something, you stand for it. There's no like double face here, right? Until today, subhanAllah, when I log into Facebook, he's one of my personal friends. And I saw the whole election go by and this and that. And his whole family, they're like hardcore Republicans. And he's actually a Republican as well, by the way. But I saw him defending Muslims in the comments of the articles that people were posting. Right? I saw people posting like pro Donald Trump articles and this and that, and when he came out and said, yeah, all Muslims need to be banned from America, when you ban all Muslims from coming to America, he was defending Muslims. And that made me understand that, and like I said, that made me understand that even though he's surrounded, like he doesn't, like the only Muslim that he really talked to and came across was me. And that's it. And I wasn't even like really trying to do da'wah to him or anything like that. Right? We had to talk to one another because we were in class, because we sat next to one another. But till today, and it's been years now that I've actually met him, like we stay in touch over Facebook or whatever, but till today, I see him defending Islam and defending Muslims. That is the power that you have. That is the power that you have as a Muslim. And that is why it is imperative that you educate yourself. And look, the goal of this conference, and, I'm an Al-Maghrib instructor. Same thing with Al-Maghrib. The goal of Al-Maghrib and the goal of this conference is not to make scholars. I'm not expecting that people are going to walk out of here as a scholar, right? I know, some of the topics that are being discussed are advanced topics, but it's not our goal to be like, we're going to create scholars. Our goal is to create educated, aware, socially responsible, and confident Muslims. That's the goal. And yes, if that inspires someone to get on the path to go study Islam on an academic level, then alhamdulillah. But that is the purpose of this conference. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it a success. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us all the tawfiq to attend, the ability to attend as many of these sessions as possible, and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us amongst those who not only learn, but act upon that which we learn. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك وجزاكم الله خيرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.